All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining Capital Conversations. I am Faya Webb, founder of Leaving a Legacy Investments. We have co-host Brianna Peters, founder of Soul Investors, and we have our guest speaker, Todd Snelling, who is wrapping up his three-part series on the anatomy of a deal. And tonight we're going to talk about actually closing and operating the deal. If you missed part one and part two, we do have them recorded and we'll drop the YouTube link for that in the chat. Part one was the purchase and sale agreement. Part two was due diligence. So again, tonight he is going to go through closing and operating the deal. With that, I will turn it over to Todd.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen here and we will get started. There we go. Okay, so like I said, this is the third part of our deal, and I'm going to take you through closing and then operating the deal. So if you remember, the first thing we did was the PSA agreement. We worked with an attorney. We created work on how we wanted to buy this deal inside our contract, laid out our dates and everything we had to do. And then we went through our due diligence. We went to the property, we inspected the property, we brought on experts. Now we've agreed that we're going to go forward with this property and purchase it. Highly likely at this time we've not lost, but our down payment money, our earnest money has gone to the seller and it's non-refundable. So we are bought and paid for. Bad choice of words, but we are going forward with this deal. So we're going to talk about closing and operating. So we're going to talk about the time when we're going to raise money, get money ready, and prepared to operate this. So if you remember on our deal, we're going to buy a building in Lexington, Kentucky. It's 100 doors. And we are going to purchase this building for $5,000. That is the agreed upon price. So when we underwrote the deal, we had to factor in not just $5,000. We have to factor in attorney fees. We have to factor in capital expenses, and I'll get to that here in a little bit. But our $5,000, or excuse me, our $5 million deal probably likely is going to turn into a $5.3 million deal, meaning that we are going to bring more money to the table. This deal is going to cost us more than $5,000 in the end. So one of the things we should have done when we underwrote the property is realize how we're going to fund the property. Most cases, we're going to go to the bank and we're going to ask for a loan, and the bank has said, okay, I like this deal. We've inspected this deal. We've looked at your underwriting. We've looked at your insurance conditions. We're going to approve your loan, but you got to bring anywhere from 20 to 30% to the table, meaning that we got to come up with 20 to 30% of $5.3 million. Now, when you first underwrote this deal back before you did your PSA, you had a general idea of how you're going to fund this deal. Whether you tried to do it as with investors' money and preferred money, some type of debt, typically, coming from a bank or whatever else. And we can talk about that structure on another call, but you have to have an idea before you get into your contract of how you're going to raise this money. So in our case, we are going to ask investors, we'll call them limited partners, who now become part of the deal for the $1.6 million. So we have until our due diligence period, until the closing date, to raise this money from our investors. This is a tough process. It is a process in which you are going to have to explain to people why you think this is a good idea. You're going to have to pay attorney to generate paperwork to protect your investors. You're going to have to collect the money, and you're going now in charge of other people's money, and they are going to become part of your deal. So that's what we're going to call. Myself, Brianna, and Faya will be the general partners, and limited partners will bring the $1.6 million to the table. That's the scenario I'm using today. Me, Faya, and Brianna could just fund the whole deal ourselves, or we could fund the whole down payment. But in this case, for the purposes of just trying to close this deal, we're going to assume that we went to investors and they provided us $1.6 million, whether that's one investor or 30 investors. So the rest of our money, the 70%, will come from what they call senior debt or bank debt or however you want to look at it, but that's where the 70% will come from. So let's break down our deal a little bit more. We know that with $5 million to buy the building, we know that we're going to spend the next $335,000 in attorney fees, in realtor fees, and other fees. That's what we need. So we're going to go to the bank and ask them, and the bank says they'll give us 70% of our deal, which is the $3.7 million. We've got to raise the 1.6, which we've agreed to do. The bank says that they are paid first from this deal. The bank is not going to extend themselves. There's not a nice thing. There's not such a thing as a nice bank. A bank is not just going to lend you money. They're going to know that if FIA defaults on their loan, they're only getting it to 70% of the cost. They get their money back and they make a little money. They're not going to lend you 100% of the deal outside of some outrageous interest rate. So that's how the bank protects itself. What happens if we looked at our deal and we knew that we have some capital expenses? So if you don't know, capital expenses are improvements you're going to bring to the property. You may have to raise that money. So you're going to raise the 1.6 million plus any other money that you think you need for capital expenses. So let's say in this scenario, you need a roof replaced. You've got some what we call HP&E upgrades, some exterior repairs, renovations, deferred maintenance. Well, now our 5.3, that's going to be $300,000. Our 5.3 loan just became 5.6 million. So we could talk a lot about how we fund CapEx or whatever else, but the bank 70% still says the same. The bank could care less about our CapEx. The only reason the bank is going to give us more than our original 70% is if they believe the value of the building supports it. If not, we have to raise $300,000 and we can't go to the bank for it, if that makes sense. The CapEx doesn't disappear. It either increases the loan if the bank likes it, like I said, or increases the amount of money or equity we need to be raised. So let's say we have 3 months to closing. These next 3 months will be some of the most stressful that you've ever been through in your life, probably, because you are now going to have to come to a point where anytime a variety of people ask you for a document, whether it's the bank, the attorney, or whatever else, you need to provide them with this document. At the same time, you need to be factoring how you're going to operate this property when you close it. Because when you close the property and the property closes at 11 a.m., at 11:01, you now own the property, are responsible for operating the property. So you're going to do double duty in these next couple months to prepare to take over this property. So I put this up here. This is controlled chaos, but it can be managed, done right. So I'm going to explain like how I would kind of do it with FIA and Brianna. I would sign them to tasks, and then they would be responsible as the point of contact. So Brianna would be the point of contact for the attorney. FIA would be the point of contact for the lenders, because almost weekly, these people will come back to you and ask you for certain things. So one of the things, let's talk a little bit about what FIA's got to do. She's going to have to, at some point, lock in an interest rate. Remember, our interest rate affects our cash flow. We have to know, a lot of times, we can't lock an interest rate in until maybe a week before closing, maybe even less. The lender's going to have thousands of conditions. I shouldn't say thousands, but they're going to have a bunch. They're going to require you to have insurance from all over the place, and enough insurance to cover the building. And what happens what about our operating agreement? The bank's going to see that. What if our operating agreement doesn't say what happens if Brianna says, I don't want to be in real estate anymore, and I walk away? The bank will ask you for hundreds of documents. The final rent roll in T12, that's a continuation of our due diligence. Somebody's going to have to keep reviewing that before we get to the closing. And then at the very last minute, somebody's going to have to sit down and make sure that nobody else outside of me, Fi, and Brianna made a mistake. Title didn't make a mistake. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
When you say you can't lock in the interest rate, why is that? Because sometimes it can take people a really long time to get to a certain point, or do you know why that is?
So a lot of times the interest rate is based on the lender requirements, how good's your credit score, what's the loan to value, everything else. The bank will wait to the very last minute to try and lock in your rate. They want to make sure that they minimize their risk as much as possible.
Okay.
Most recent deal I did, I think we were 3 or 4 days from closing before they locked in the rate.
Oh, wow.
Now, it works to our advantage because at that point there was a rate cut from the Fed.
Nice.
Sometimes it doesn't work to your advantage. The bank is not going to overextend itself. They're not nice about it. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Sorry to interrupt you like that.
No problem. And then somebody's got to be responsible for the investors. Somebody has to be responsible for collecting this money, tracking each individual wire that comes in, putting it in a bank account, verifying everybody's equity. So Faya's friend, Brenda, put in $100,000. She technically should get whatever that proceed, 2.7% of the building. All that's got to be verified. Legal and title will ask you for a bunch of documents closing documents. Again, at the bottom, your entity structure I mentioned earlier, that's the operating agreement and how we'll operate the building. Title should have been part of your due diligence. And then we kind of go to the Wild West. We start talking about insurance, and insurance is the biggest thing, one of the bigger things in multifamily now, because it's a hard target to hit. The insurance may want to inspect your building before they go into. You have to bind the property, which means you have to get it finalized. They're going to work with your lender. They're going to provide premiums. Remember, when you underwrote this deal, you calculated what you thought your premium should be. Now you're going to find out what they actually could be. Hopefully they're not higher. If not, that's going to affect your cash flow. And then you'll get something called a clear to close, meaning that we're at imminent closing, we're good, no other thing is needed. But on that day, almost the day before or on that day, something happens. You got to provide more information. So eventually, when you get to the closing table, you get there with your fingers crossed, hoping you can close the deal. Now, at that same time, if we're going to close, like I said, if you're going to close at 11 a.m., at 11:01, you own this building. The people in your building, which is our 100 units, do not care that you bought this building. They want to make sure that they go on living in their apartment for their rent without any interruption. So I made a joke about this a little bit, but I say congratulations, but really nobody cares. There's no big party. You have to stop operating operating your building in the best manner for. So then you have to make a decision. So almost simultaneously, as you do those steps that we just talked about, you're also going to create another set of steps on who manages your property. Okay, so my favorite guy, Michael Scott, he's going to come in, manage our property. But in reality, are we going to use a property management company or are we going to manage it ourselves? So 100 units, can the three of us, me, Brianna, and Faya, manage 100 units? Probably not. Can't show up for every showing. We can't look at every lease. So we're going to hire a property management company. That property management company needs to take those keys at 11:01. A lot of times they will start to work with you 3 or 4 months beforehand to come in, take it over, to transition. Remember, they've got their own systems, so they'll have you have leases. These people will be in leases, but at some point, these leases, new leases, renewed leases will be turned over to a property management company. The people, your renters, will need to know how to request a repair. How do they pay their rent? All that there is a fee for it. There is a fee for managing the property. There could be a fee for buying materials for your repairs. Contrary, if it was smaller and you operated the property yourself, you would have less costs, but you would be responsible for the plumbing. You're responsible for what happens in the middle of the night when a tenant calls you. So there's a trade-off there. It's a huge trade-off. 100 units is a lot for a single GP team. But if you use the property manager, somebody's got to manage the property manager, meaning that you just would not turn it over. You have to be in constant contact with the property manager and put your systems in place with the property manager. So one of the things that we go through as owners, the GP team will meet with the property manager and discuss budgets. We'll discuss monthly financial statements, cash flow, distributions, hold the actual property manager assigned to the property accountable. In our current deal, there is not one expense that I don't look at. Meaning that if they go to Brenda's apartment and they spend $30 to fix her toilet handle, I see that $30. Then that gets reconciled against your bank account. They get their money, and then you get a draw from the bank, from the property management company every month. And that goes into your account to pay back the investors. You've made a commitment now to pay investors. You need to use that operating capital to pay investors. That's part of your general partnership.
Hey, Todd, how long prior to closing, or at what point are you starting to look at property managers? Are you just having a property manager lined up going into the deal, or what has been a best practice for that?
You need to identify your property manager right away, and it would be nice if you can take your property manager through your due diligence walkthrough.
Okay, so have them going through due diligence.
Right? So they can look at it and figure out how they are going to run it. And then you'll have multiple talks with them about how they're going to run it and how they're going to implement their plan. A property management company generally works on a 30-day cycle. So this is the expenses for the month. I get my draw 15 days after that. So I'm 45 days after an actual month before I get my money in the bank. So the troublesome part about it is for 45 days, I don't know what's going on. Does that make sense? For 45 days, outside of looking at the general ledger weekly, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how expenses are being handled. And then the whole process starts over 45 days from that. So you have to have a plan. Right now, we are meeting with our property manager weekly since taking over our building, just to figure out how we're going to work together. And there's been ups and downs, and that's normal or whatever else. But eventually, hopefully that may go every 2 weeks and then maybe every month. But right now we're meeting every week to make sure this guy can handle our property.
And do those meetings, go ahead, Faya.
Todd, you talked about all of the documentation that's needed. And the property management company is probably going to handle leases, all things related to tenants and managing the property. All of the documentation that you're submitting ahead of time to the lender, et cetera, that is directly through the attorney?
No. So what I would do is figure out what the property management so I'm constantly submitting money to close my deal to the people that need it. Title, attorney, bank, whatever. On the property management side, they're going to ask you for current leases. They're going to ask you everything from was your electric bill get paid? They're going to want to know, they're taking over this building, so they want to know who pays the trash, who pays the electric, who pays the cable, who pays the things like that. And they're going to want to start seeing maybe a repair list, a 30-day repair list, what needs to be fixed. When they walk the building, like during Brianna's question, they'll see certain things they want to fix. They want to turn this building into their own. Okay. So, and they're going to need those documents way before the closing date. Again, they're going to take it over the minute you close it.
Okay.
Then they have to create communications to the tenants and everything like that. So I would think you're going to start giving them, if it's long as okay with the seller, you're going to start giving them documents probably 2 months beforehand so they can get ready.
Okay.
A little bit more. Then you have investor and lender communications on operating your deal. This is where we're at. There's a lot of good deals that die in a lack of communication. You know what I mean? Hey, we've had a tough month because our elevator broke. We had a tough month because of this. There's been deals that have closed, and then a month later they've had a fire. So if you're going to do this, I highly suggest you communicate clearly with your investors, with your lenders, because there's a lot of deals, like I said, that die with it. You know, it can be done, but it is tough. You need to have a good team. Your team would have to execute. You've done a lot of work up to this point. Your team is going to be exhausted, and it's not just you, it's your lender, your title, your attorney, like I said, your property managers. But there has to be a plan to do it. Like I said, Brianna's going to handle title, Fia's going to handle lending, I'm going to handle investors. And chances are your team's going to meet 2 or 3 times a week as you get to that closing line to see what is needed, because there will be mishaps, there will be issues. You just have to manage the closing, if that makes sense. So that's really kind of what I have today. It's a holiday week, so I don't want to take up too much time. I think I'm right at 30 minutes, so I can answer any questions when it comes to managing or closing. You guys have any?
I know you mentioned like communication is really important and you're meeting with your property manager weekly. Are there like certain KPIs that you're reviewing every week, or what are those conversations like? Are they just merging your two styles together on how to operate the property, or what does that look like for you?
So right now, what it looks like is vacancy. Vacancy is always your number one thing. Like we have 100 units, but we're down 10. That's a 10% vacancy. That's a huge number. It's a huge number. The bottom line. How are you fixing it? How are you marketing these units? And what does that look like? Are you getting a lot of calls? Are you not getting calls? Do people not like the units? They think they're ugly. Is it an ugly color? And then the next thing is delinquencies. Are you collecting rents on time? Delinquencies is very key. That's why you have to stay up on these numbers. The next thing would be repairs, things like capital expenses that stuff breaks. They have to manage that, and then how your money's being spent. So it's money in, money to the property management company, money for expenses, and then money in your account. So you have to manage each time money crosses your face, for lack of a better word. And most of our calls are about an hour, and then stuff just comes up. You know what I mean? Issues with the fire alarm, and the insurance company wants this. You know, we've had to wait 3 months after closing for our lender to inspect a certain kind of lease that we want to do. That's 3 months without upgrading or renewing our leases and collecting more money. And we had to pay the lender to review it. That doesn't seem fair to me at all. But that's kind of the things when I talk about with banks and stuff like that. These banks will ask you for all kinds of stuff, and you have to have one person that's responsible for it.
So
and the biggest tip I could give you is have one person responsible for each thing, meaning that Brianna is our point of contact for the title company. So Brianna is a part of every conversation with the title company. Fia is part of every conversation with the lender. That way, no wires are crossed. Everybody gets what they need. Everybody's CC'd on the email. But my biggest tip I can give you is have one person responsible for everything and be that point of communication.
So at this point, if you discover, let's say, 10 vacant units and there are issues or discrepancies with the property and people's expectations, would this be a good time? And would you already have funds set aside to make necessary upgrades to make those units more attractive? Or how does that work with those units being upgraded and then the rest of the units not?
I think it depends on how you buy the property. If you knew that you were having 10 going in and you knew you had to remodel 10 units, that would be part of your CapEx you set aside. If you are learning that people don't like the color, you've got a problem. Like, well, does everybody hate the same color? Well, what's going on? Why are these people not liking it? Or maybe they say they're too small or they don't like the appliances and stuff like that. Then you kind of have to pivot on what makes it more attractive. Maybe at $1,500 they don't like it, but at $1,400 they like it. And that's something you've got to factor in. All that goes back to your underwriting. If you're going to underwrite for 10% vacancy, That's a huge number. And it is a number that you're going to have to deal with, either rent or have money put back. Because it's obviously with 10 units down, 10 times, 1,500, that's a lot of money not coming in. Anything else?
I had a question about investor communication. So how often do you communicate with investors? What do you communicate with investors? If there are difficult things that you need to communicate, how much do you share? Do you problem solve before you share? So basically kind of your overall rhythm with communicating with investors, I would say.
There are investors to the deal, and then there are Todd's investors. So investors to the deal, we create an email, typically quarterly. Most investing payments, most preferred payments go out quarterly. We send an email. We explain what happened. Hey, we closed today. This is the plan for the next 60 days. We're going to spend a lot of time with the property manager. I mean, it's very, very plain English, very blunt, and saying this is where we're at. This is where we're working towards. In the one case I know, they went up to their investors and said a fire broke out in the building. Nobody was hurt. This is the plan. And the guy that I know that did it, he did it right. He's like, we were offered this by the insurance company, shockingly low. We're going to war with the insurance company. And I think as long as you're honest with people and you're straightforward, people are okay with a minor setback or even a large setback, knowing that you've got a plan to get it covered. I would not purposely withhold any bad information. Right? So our vacancy went to 10% because all 10 people work for the same company, and that company moved out of town. So we're going to try and work with the name. We're trying to fill these up quick. That's our number one priority. We're going to take a cash hit in the first month, hopefully get it halfway built the next month, and then we're back to normal month 2. It's not our problem. It's not our fault, but we're definitely going to solve it. We have a plan. And I think most people, if you're honest with that, that's why a lot of these deals die in communication, because they just don't share enough information.
From an investor's perspective, I agree. Transparency is key, because I've been a part of a deal of a 48, 52 unit project that they did have a fire like right in the beginning, right? And all of the communication that came out gave us the details about the fire, what stage they're at, what's going on, how, if that would delay our returns. And having all of that information and knowing what's going to happen, you have time to kind of plan for it. But you also learn to trust the people that you've invested with, because they're giving you that information and building that relationship with you. So you're kind of secure in that investment and know what's going to happen versus, the quarter passes and you're refreshing your email, refreshing your bank account, and you're like, where is my money? Right? And you have no idea that there was a fire 2 months ago, and now they're trying to give you this information. Right. I think that would not work out as well at all. So transparency is definitely key.
Exactly. Because if people find out, they'll find out.
Yeah.
They're going to find out. No matter what happens, they're going to find out.
And once they have the information, it's a level of comfort, because they know they're not guessing. They know what's going on. All right. I understand there's a fire. I understand you're working with the insurance company and you don't have the answers yet, but this is where you are in the process. And once those answers come, you'll provide us with more information. So yeah, it's that communication is like a key piece, especially for people who've invested their money in the project, right? People are at different levels. There are some people who have money to burn that they're throwing away just to avoid tax implications. There are people who have scraped and saved to put this money in this project. So it's like a huge deal to them. So yeah, that the communication key, like, it cannot be overstated how important that is.
And a lot of my investors that invested with me in this deal, they all have my phone number. So I've had a couple call me and say, hey, what's going on? I'm just getting nervous. Why are you getting nervous? Well, I'm just sitting here thinking about it. Okay. Well, this is what's going on. You know what I mean? Call me back if, and I go through A, B, and C or whatever. And they're like, okay, thanks. And this literally happened to me. Thanks, Todd. I feel better, whatever. I said, well, call me back and get nervous again. Just talking through it.
Well, that's good that you have that line of communication. I think that's important.
Yes.
Is there anything that you would absolutely do on your next deal that you did on this deal? And is there something that you would absolutely avoid doing that you did on this deal that you would avoid doing on your next deal?
I would avoid our particular lender. I'm not going to mention their name, but that's who I would avoid. We used an online, the word for it, drive for all our documents. It's the best thing we ever did. They're accessible to everybody in the meeting. So when the title calls Brianna, she has that stuff at her fingertips. When the lender calls Faya, she has that stuff at her fingertips. Everybody has an assignment. Everybody checks in weekly. That is the best thing. A single point of communication. Everybody's got access to the documents. That's really, I mean, even to this day, that's what we do when we have to upload it. I think the lender was the only person I think in this deal that kind of soured me a little bit, but so.
So we have a lot of, or quite a few investors or potential investors that kind of join Capital Conversations. And a lot of questions that they send repeatedly is how do you form a team to go into these joint ventures and syndications? Like how do you build those relationships? How do you know when you're working with the right people?
Yeah, so that's a good question. My current team is probably the best one I've been on. And that we all bring something different to the table. We all still have different responsibilities after the deal closed. I have been a part of some shaky teams, to be honest with you. I think a lot of times it's tough conversations right away. You know, if me, Faya, and Brianna are going to build an operating agreement, does that operating agreement have something in it? Whereas if Faya doesn't do her duties, can she be removed? Can she still have her equity in the building and just be removed from the GP so me and Brianna can operate it? This will happen. I'm sure it has happened. I'd rather have those tough conversations before. Because chances are on a deal like this, it's 5 or 6 years maybe. Same teammates, 5 or 6 years, meeting once a week. You're going to get sick of everybody. You know, you're going to have your problems. A very diverse team is better. Somebody good with numbers. And typically there's one person, as is in this deal, that's kind of the head of the deal. He's the one that kind of brought the team together. He's kind of the spokesman. The deal question, the team question is a tough one to answer because I don't have any criteria. I probably do deep down inside and in my head and in my heart, but you know what I mean?
It's also probably going to be different.
What's that?
It's probably also going to be different for different people.
Yeah, it is. I mean, depending on what your level of trust is and, you know, what your control issues are. I've got some control issues and want to take care of certain things or whatever else, but I think an investor likes a guy with control issues. So
Yeah.
I like that you control the numbers.
Yeah.
That's my favorite part.
Yeah.
The numbers in the underwriting. Everybody just call Todd.
Yeah.
And we're safe.
Safe zone. Safe
And then
zone.
when you start to see your numbers come in, you realize how was I good at underwriting or do I have this deal completely blown? That's a tough position to be in.
So Todd, how did this deal, I guess, maybe change the way you think about risk and leadership? Because I feel like both play a pivotal role in the process.
So I felt like for me personally, and I won't speak for my team, but for me personally, I was very cautious whoever was part of my deal, except for my attorney. I knew my attorney, I had paid him, he was on our side, but everybody else I dealt with, I was cautious with to try and get across the bottom line. Because nothing seemed to be easy when it dealt with title or it dealt with, particularly with the lender. And when you do that, you're trying to close a deal and the lender wants more stuff, and this fee may change and that fee may change. You become, what's the word I'm looking for? Probably hardened from it or whatever else. You know what I mean? You're defending your deal to these people that are getting paid to question it. So they're going to question everything you've done, your insurance underwriting, and they're going to question the fire suppression system, and they're going to question your leases and everything else. And I think it's at some point in this, I went through a Todd versus the world thing or whatever, just try to get it done, or our team versus the world, because I don't want to speak for them, but I felt that way. So you go through a little of that.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions?
Ryan, do you?
I don't. I think I'm good thus far. Don't be surprised if
All
one pops up though. You know how I operate.
Yeah. Email away.
Email, call, anything.
Yeah. Either way.
All right. Well, Todd, we appreciate you very much coming on and sharing 3 episodes of knowledge with us. I think it was very much needed and very informative, especially to newer investors and GPs and LPs. So we appreciate you very much. And this actually wraps up. My goodness, if I can talk, wraps up Capital Conversations for 2025. So we thank everybody for all of the episodes, everything that you attended. Thank you, Faya, to all of our speakers. We will continue on into 2026. We have lots of great things planned. We plan to offer a little bit more diversity in what we bring into 2026. So make sure you all stay tuned in and follow us for new episodes next year. Anything that you guys want to add?
Nope. Thank you guys very much for having me.
Thank you,
Thank
Todd.
you.
See you
Happy
guys.
holidays, everybody.
Peace out. Yeah. Happy holidays.